Well, hey, Jamie,
Hey,
how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good, good, good. Glad to have you joining me.
Thank you.
Maybe it'll be just you and me today. We will
Okay.
see.
I missed the
Appreciate
homeward.
you. Uh,
There was a homeward meeting like right before yours. I
uh,
think I missed it. Well, there were a lot of meetings today.
yes, there were. Yes, there were. But you picked the best one to be at.
Well, that's what I thought. This was the one I remembered, so it must be the best, right?
Must be the best one. Yeah, and important information because this
Yeah.
this comes up in all of our negotiations. It's buyers' concerns, it's seller concerns. You're going to wind up being a better agent as a result of it. So I would say since it's just you and me, or looks like it might be, we might wrap up early, but the last
That
time I said that, I took the whole hour anyway. So
is
that might happen again.
it's
So
okay.
because I packed a lot of content into today.
Good.
So and when it comes to closing costs, the first thing that I want you to know and realize is that both the buyers and sellers, oh great, I'm going to have all kinds of animation in here. I didn't realize. Both the buyers and sellers are going to have closing costs.
Okay.
Okay. And so I tell you that because very often we talk about closing cost inside, okay, realtor to realtor, we're not talking about closing costs. We're talking about sellers' contributions to closing costs.
Okay.
Okay? So we want to be specific with our language, and it can be really confusing for a new agent hearing somebody talking about a deal with closing costs, and it's not a deal with closing costs. Every deal has closing costs. It's a deal with sellers' contributions to closing costs.
Okay.
So we just want to be hyper aware of that. So, oh, great. This is all going to be fun. Get rid of all the animation.
So,
Get rid of all
is
the animation.
is the commission, is that considered a closing cost?
Well, that's a great question. So,
And my other question about that is, because I've been on, the MLS looking at, homes and expired homes and all that stuff. When it shows the commission, the other agent's commission is 3%.
yeah.
I know when you fill out the listing, you put the 6% in for the commission because it splits. How come it doesn't say that on the MLS? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Why doesn't it say it on the MLS what the listing agent's getting?
yeah, because is it just already a known fact that it's 6%?
Well,
Like, here, I'll show you.
you're representing a buyer, right?
Right. Yes.
And you're getting paid for the work you do for that buyer,
Yes.
right? And you're looking at the co-op commission and saying 3%. I'm happy with that. My buyer doesn't need to pay anything extra. Does it matter what the listing agent is making on the deal?
No, but I'm saying when I'm filling out my listing contract, like if
Yeah.
I'm listing a home and on my contract, I put the 6%,
Yes.
how come it doesn't go like, down here, on the paperwork on here where it
Okay.
says that the
Well,
listing agent gets 3%? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm just
I,
confused with those numbers.
so we'll think about the audience. Okay. The listing agreement is between the seller and the agent.
Hmm.
Okay. Does the buyer's agent need to see it?
No.
No. So it doesn't belong in the MLS. In the MLS, we're sharing the information that's pertinent to the buyer's agent.
Got you.
Okay.
When I look at that, no, okay, they're getting 3% of this commission.
Well, you don't know if you're on the listing side, you're the one that's putting in the MLS that we're offering 3% to the other side.
Oh, that's what
Okay.
that means?
That's what that means.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
that meant they were taking, because
No,
there's some that say
when you see the
4%, some that
when you
say
see the
2.5.
co-op commission where it
Yeah,
says co-op on there,
right, like, right. Here, let me hold this up so you can see. Like, okay, so like this one right here.
just read it to me. I
Where it
can't
says
see that.
commission 3%.
Yeah, that's what's being offered to you as the buyer's agent.
Oh, so if it's like 2.5, then
Then you're making less. Okay. And if you filled out
okay.
your buyer's brokerage agreement, then your buyer's going to have that additional commission to pay
Right.
if you want to enforce it. So you need to have a conversation with them about it.
Okay, it all makes sense now. Because I was trying to figure out how, when, like, if I was to do a listing agreement
Yeah.
with a seller and I want
Mhm.
to put the 6% in there, but then the 3% was showing up on here, I was like, that
Nope.
it just
Nope.
in my mind, it wasn't lining up right, but now it's lining up. I
Now
got
it
it.
does.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
Carry on.
let's start. So both buyers and sellers have closing costs.
Mhm.
Let's start with the seller's side. Okay. What all closing costs does the seller have? And you asked the question, are real estate commissions part of the seller's closing costs? Yeah.
Okay.
Very first thing. And that's their biggest piece of the closing cost usually is
Okay.
what they're paying commissions. Because at least in Georgia, they're paying their agent and the other agent, the buyer's
Right.
agent as well.
Is
Okay.
that still kind of the same right now with how the market is? Or are buyers paying
It's
their half?
well, it's potentially changing. And for some, yeah, that may be how they win that deal.
Okay.
They say, I'll pay for my own agent. Okay.
Okay.
So that's definitely a possibility. And that too keeps the sales price down so you don't run into appraisal issues, but that is more cash they have to bring to the closing table
Okay.
for the buyer.
For the buyer, but the
Okay.
seller, we're talking about seller.
Yeah, for the seller, they're walking away with the same amount of money. So for the seller, when it comes to paying for what happens at the closing table, we've got our real estate commissions. They have attorney's fees
Right.
for researching the deed, getting all the documents ready for the closing. They're going to be responsible for their prorated property taxes.
Oh, that's
Okay,
right.
so depending on what time of the year, okay, they may be receiving money or they may be paying money.
Okay.
Okay, so when are property taxes usually paid?
Is it in the end of the year?
Yeah, usually around October is when the bills go out and people start paying it. So if we close in November or December, we've already paid the property taxes for the year,
Mhm.
and whatever portion of the year left, the buyer's going to have to give us the money for because we paid for it already.
Oh, that's right.
Everything before that, we're having to give the buyer the taxes he's going to have to pay in October for our portion of the time that we owned it. Okay, does that make
But
sense?
yeah, but like now that it's January, or I'm sorry, March.
March.
I know. Now that it's March, we would who how does that work when we're in
Okay.
March?
No, and it's great. So here it is, uh, March 1st, and we're closing. It's actually March 3rd, but March 1st, we're closing today.
Mhm.
March 1st. When did the seller own the property? Well, all of January and February.
Right.
Okay. The taxes for January and February aren't going to get paid until October. So we'll look at what the taxes were in 2019 because do we know yet what they're going to be for 2020 or
No, not yet.
2021? We'll look back at 2020 because we don't know what's 2021 yet. And we'll figure out what's 2 months of the taxes. And the seller's going to have to pay those at the closing table so that the buyer has it when it's time to pay it in October. Okay. The same thing's true for your HOA. Okay. If your HOA dues are $100 a month, $1,200 of the year, depending on when those are due, if we had to pay them January 1st for this year and we close in March 1st, well, then the buyer's going to owe us for 10 months of the HOA. So we'll
Yeah.
get a credit back if we pay them at the end of the year or middle of the year, whatever portion that we owe for the time we're in it, that gets paid.
Okay.
Okay. And in some counties, you have to pay that final water bill. And so they'll contact the county water authority and find out what the final water bill is and make them pay that.
Who
Okay.
contacts them?
Huh?
The seller contacts the water company,
No,
or
the closing attorney.
oh, the closing
Closing
attorney takes
attorney,
care of all of that?
Yep, they take care of all that.
How much does it normally cost to use an attorney? Like, what's the average? Like, I don't know.
We're gonna look at some real examples.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
I'll
you'll
slow down. I'll
you
slow
will
down.
get to see that. Okay, so miscellaneous fees, wiring fees.
Mhm.
Okay, if you're having the proceeds wired to you, that costs the attorney's office to do it. They're going to charge you. Okay, if a home warranty was part of the contract, the seller's going to pay that at the closing table. And then if they're giving any contributions to the buyer's closing cost. Okay,
Is that happening right now?
some
Okay.
less and less, but certainly some.
Okay.
And it depends on the price point. It depends on how desperate the seller is, depends on how strong the offer is from the buyer. You know, what if the buyer's waived everything else? You know, I don't need an inspection. I don't need any repairs. I'm good. I just need this help at the closing table. Seller may agree to it.
Okay.
So every deal's a little bit different. So that's our seller's closing cost. So let's flip over to the other side of the aisle. And let me get all these loaded in here. I had no idea all of these animations were in here.
It's okay.
There we go. All right. So for the buyer's closing cost, our biggest cost is going to be our lender fees. Okay. And those can include, don't always include, the application fee and origination fee. That's what they call the lender. When they usually are talking about a lender fee, they're talking about an origination fee for originating the loan, for writing the loan.
Mhm.
They charge you for that.
Right.
Right. And that's thousands and thousands of dollars. You may pay an appraisal fee. You may pay an underwriting fee. Okay. And the reason I listed all of these is you go from lender to lender. Most of them are going to charge fairly close to each other, the same amount of money for the same type of loan, but they may rearrange their fees and call them different things and break them up different ways to try and make it look better. Okay. It's kind of like the phone company with their taxes and fees and everything, right? Lenders do the same thing. Okay. Potentially we have discount points. Now, do you know what discount points are?
Yeah. Isn't that where they buy the loan down a little bit so
They
that
buy the rate down.
yeah, so the
Yes.
interest rate isn't as high.
So they pay a percentage of the price of the home up front to get a lower interest rate over the whole term of the loan. Okay. And then they're going to have prepaid interest. They're going to have to pay the interest. We close today. Okay. Well, you're not going to have a loan payment due until the first of the following month. Okay. So what they do is they make you go ahead and pay the interest for this month. So depending on how many days there are left this month, you're going to go ahead and pay the interest on it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Then we're going to have to put money into escrow. Okay. And all escrow is just a holding account for things that are going to have to be paid in the future. But when you buy a house, the lender wants to make sure that there's enough money there to pay those future things. Okay. So, for example, the homeowner's insurance, they're going to make you pay 1 full year of the homeowner's insurance and 2 more months. Okay. So, and the reason that is we're going to have a homeowner's insurance bill due again in a year. So we're going to pay for this year. We're going to get 2 months, and every month part of your payment is your homeowner's insurance. So when we get 10 months from now, we'll now have a full year saved up in the escrow account, and they'll have enough there to pay the next bill when it comes due. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Same thing with property taxes. They will probably make you escrow. One, you'll have to pay any taxes that are due right now. Okay. So depending on the time of the year, if we're sitting here and the tax bill's due in the next 30 days, 60 days, that lender may make you go ahead and pay that tax bill now. Okay. So we're in September, October, November. If the taxes haven't been paid, they've got to be paid at the closing table.
Okay.
And they're going to make you escrow 3 months of the taxes.
Okay.
Okay. Again, to make sure there's enough money for next year when that next bill comes due.
Don't you, isn't, like, I know with my mortgage, my taxes and insurance are in with my mortgage payment.
Yeah,
that-
but your mortgage payment is your principal and interest
Yeah.
plus your escrow charges.
Oh, and escrow is considered the homeowner's insurance and property taxes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. All right. Then we've got to pay the attorney.
Mhm.
Okay. We're going to pay him to do the title exam to make sure that the title is clear and not clouded, and we can actually transfer the property ownership. We're going to pay for title insurance that says if something goes wrong, was missed with the title, if some new information comes forward, that there's somebody that's going to give us money to make it right. We're going to pay a closing fee to the attorney. We're going to pay recording fees because they're going to file the deed with the county that shows you're the new owner after closing. Okay. We're going to have to pay any prorated property taxes. We're going to have to pay any prorated HOA dues. We're going to have to pay any HOA initiation fees. Okay. So just like the seller had to pay their portion on those, we have to pay our portion if we owe any. And then if we're not there in person at the closing and we're having to do a mail away, there may be mail away fees that we have to do for the extra work and prep it takes to do it. And then potentially there's real estate commissions. And you brought up a really good example of it. So I've signed a buyer's brokerage agreement with my client that I'm going to get 3%, and they're going to pay the difference if the seller doesn't pay it. Okay. The seller's only offering 2.5%. So at the closing table, the buyer's going to owe 0.5%. If I choose to enforce it. Okay. I can always forgive that other 0.5%. And may or may not, but if I enforce it, there's going to be commissions. And as competitive it is in the market and with some of the lawsuits that are out there, that's something we may see more and more of in the future. We're not seeing much of it right now, though.
Lawsuits for what?
That's another conversation for another day, but there are class action lawsuits out there right now that are saying that sellers ought to pay their agent, buyers ought to pay their agent. That the structure where sellers pay the buyer's agent it isn't fair to the sellers. So NAR has stood behind us and is fighting to keep things the way they are. And so far we've done a very good job of holding off any of those lawsuits. So we have some very sound arguments for it. And another day we can have that conversation.
That's fine. I just was curious.
Yeah, so that's what they are. So one of the things I want to make you aware of, this is a lot of fees, right?
It really is.
It really is. And those are all due at closing. And these
How come
don't
it says
include your down
buyer?
payment.
Why does it say buyer's closing costs at the top? That's supposed to be sellers, right?
No, these are the buyer's closing costs.
Oh,
We did the sellers first.
okay.
That was the last page.
So this is what the buyer has to do.
This is
Wow.
what the
Oh, yeah.
buyer has to pay.
The buyer has the loan.
The buyer has the loan.
It's been a long day.
Okay. So they pay for all of this plus their down payment. whether it be their 3%, 3.5%, 5%, 10%, 20%.
Right.
Now, is every buyer going to pay every one of these fees?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. Like you don't have to have private mortgage insurance if you've got 20% equity in the home. Okay. So that would be one thing that's off the table. Not everybody's going to pay mail away fees. We don't always have an HOA. Okay. If it's a cash deal, okay, which should be my next slide. That was just supposed to be one little pop up.
Okay.
That's so funny. Even cash purchases have closing costs, right? Because the attorney still has to do the title exam and the title insurance. You still have
Right.
your closing fees, your recording fees. You still owe your prorated taxes. So just because it's cash doesn't mean that there aren't closing costs. You just won't have any lender fees. Okay. All right. So going on from there, there is no way to figure out what the closing costs are going to be without a whole bunch of information being known.
Right.
Okay. You have got to know the actual property address. Okay. So when lenders do a pre-qualification and they estimate for a buyer what their cash that they're going to have to bring to the closing table is, it's just a guess because we don't have an actual property address yet, which means we don't know what the actual taxes are or what the HOA fees are going to be. Okay. So we've got to know the property address. We've got to know the actual closing date. Okay. Because all those prorations change depending on when it is in the month.
Who does those prorations?
The lender and the attorney, as they're preparing all the closing documents.
I don't have to do any of that.
You know, well, I don't want you to do any of it. And
Okay,
that,
I don't want
that's
to.
kind of one of the big things about this is I want you guys, I get asked on a regular basis, how do I estimate what the closing costs are? And the way you estimate what the closing costs are is you call the lender and you ask them, what are our estimated closing costs? Okay. Because you don't want to do all this.
No, it's out of my.
But you do need to understand it because you
No.
need to be able to explain it to your buyer. You need to be able to explain it to your seller. You need to be able to recognize it on a settlement statement and be able to talk competently about it.
I agree.
So we need the actual property address, the actual closing date. We know the actual taxes. We need to know what the insurance quote is and what's that really going to be. We need to know the HO fees if applicable. Okay. Good example, the homeowner's insurance quote, even when the lender does it, is still going to be a guess when we're typically talking to them because we don't know the age of the roof yet. And your homeowner's insurance changes based on the age of the roof. Okay. So one of those little things that a lot of this, we're giving our best guesses, even when we have extra information. What the HOA fees, the type of program, okay? Conventional FHA, VA, and USDA all have different costs, okay? Those origination fees and lender fees are different depending on the type of loan, okay? And the amount of down payment and the sales price. And the sales price is important because some of those fees, particularly the lender fees, some fees are fixed. You pay this much money. Some of them are a percentage of what the sales price is. So without knowing what the sales price is going to be, there's no way to accurately get the cost. And then what their credit score is. Okay. The riskier a loan is, the lower somebody's credit score is. Do you think lenders charge more or less?
They charge more.
They charge more, and it makes sense that they would charge more. So we can't, without knowing all that information, we just can't answer it. So, John, did you have a question there, bud?
Yes. As far as the roof is concerned, what's the maximum amount of years that roof should be in order to get a good rate?
That would be a good question for your insurance provider.
Oh, okay.
And it's going to be different from insurance company to insurance company. They think about things differently, right? That's something that's going to make them unique. That's one of the reasons that you should shop your insurance rate. And I highly encourage you, check out Keller Covered for your home insurance quotes. Okay, you're typically going to get your best rates there.
Okay.
All right. So as I was saying, some fees are set regardless of sales price, and some fees are percentages of the sales price and loan amount. And lower credit score borrowers will have higher costs associated with the interest rate. Okay, so and think about that. Because we're having to pay the prepaid interest, you know, the higher their interest rate is, the higher that prepaid interest cost is going to be. So let's walk through an example, okay, of if we wanted to estimate the closing cost, how we would go about doing it. Okay, so I don't want you to do it, but I want you to understand how you would do it and how lenders do it, how they think about it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the lender fees, which a good rule of thumb to guess what the lender fees are going to be is the sales price times 1% plus $3,500. That's what we're estimating the lender fees to be. Okay. This is where people that go with Keller Mortgage save money because there are no lender fees. So when we talk about saving $5,000 to $8,000 on a property, it's because that fee doesn't get charged by Keller Mortgage. Okay, but every other lender does. So we're gonna have the sales price times 1% plus 3,500. Okay, that's our lender fees plus our estimated prepaids and escrow. So for our taxes, we need the actual property taxes divided by 2. So 6 months of tax escrow. For the insurance, depending on the sales price, the house size, age of the roof, could be anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800. That gets us in the ballpark. And then prepaid interest. So what are we estimating the interest is going to be till the end of the day? Okay. So using a $225,000 purchase as an example, then $2,250 plus $3,500, $5,750 would be a good estimate for the lender fees, but you probably want to round up. So we're just going to say $6,000. Okay. Then we have to go estimate all the prepaids. So for taxes, we look up in the tax records, and the taxes were $3,600 last year. Well, we're going to need $1,800 in escrow this year. For their insurance, they're going to need a year plus 3 months. Okay, so if we're guessing $1,500, it's going to be $1,500 plus 2 months. So that's $1,800. And then depending on the day of the month, $50 a day until the end of the month. All right. So somewhere around $3,600 would be our total. And add that 6,000 and 3,600, going to be somewhere around 9,600. And we might even want to round that up a little bit. Okay. And we need to add in any HOA fees that we know are going to be there, which could include the initiation fee and whatever our proration is for the year. Yeah.
Is there a way to get these slides like as a printout, just like as a little?
Yeah, I'll do
Okay.
that for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is when you're dealing with specialty programs, down payment assistant programs, and USDA, so things like Georgia Dream, this way of estimating isn't going to work. Okay. Because with those special programs, they have to make the money back for those in some way, form, or fashion. So they usually have higher fees associated with them. You're going to get help with your down payment, but you're also going to pay a little bit more either in your closing costs or over the term of the loan.
What's USDA loan?
A USDA loan is it's a conventional loan product that's geographically based. It's to promote development in suburban areas, rural areas, really. And so there's only certain places on the map that you can get a USDA loan. So if it's in one of those rural areas on the map, then that's a program that you can apply for that's a 100% loan. It has no down payment. It's got high closing costs, but it has no down payment.
I've heard like USDA approved or something, in
Yeah.
those ads,
Yeah.
and I never really thought that had to do with a loan. Okay.
Yep. Well, it could also be the U.S. Dairy Association, I suppose. But that is what it is. USDA, U.S. Dairy Association.
Oh,
Again,
maybe.
promoting farms.
Oh, okay.
So, but you may have heard a milk commercial that used it. All right. So guys, where you're gonna see and really understand the fees is when you look at the settlement statement. Okay. And the settlement statement, while they can look very different from each other, they're all standardized. Okay. They have the same fields, the same information on them, but these are from 3 closings of mine. And you can see that each of them is formatted a little bit differently, looks a little different from each other, but they're the same. Okay. So we're going to dig in and we're going to look at one specifically. Okay. And on most settlement statements, you have the seller's fees and credits on one side. You have the borrower's debits and credits on the other side. So like looking down the seller side, and we're gonna have to go through a few slides to get through the whole long list. The purchase price was $335,000. Okay, they are getting a credit for $199.63 for the garbage bill that's going to be due. Okay, so the borrower is paying them now to pay the garbage bill that's due later. Okay. Likewise, the borrower is paying the HOA fees that have not been paid yet, but will be due for the portion of time they lived in the property. And so we're getting a credit over here for the HOA. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then we have the seller paying the commissions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we have our loan charges. Okay. So they paid 301.43 in points. This is where they bought the loan down. They had a flood certification fee, their mortgage insurance premium to HUD of $5,420. Okay. They had their prepaid interest, which was $20 a day from February 5th to March 1st. They had their homeowners insurance. They're escrowing 3 months of homeowners insurance, and they were escrowing 8 months of property taxes. As we go to the next page, we're picking up right here at property taxes. Okay. When you added everything together, they needed to make an adjustment of $881.92 for some reason. I'm really not sure what that charge is.
Is it like just miscellaneous, maybe?
It might be, but usually that would be detailed out. So
What's the first? What's the word in front of adjustment? It's too small for me to see.
No. Okay. These total of fees right here, the lender gave them a discount of $881. So the total loan origination fee was $6,803.70. So if you added all of this up and subtracted that, you would get their loan origination fee.
Oh, okay.
So that was a lender adjustment they put in there.
So the 881 was a credit from the lender.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then we had an appraisal fee, a credit report fee, a post-closing fee, a closing protection letter fee to the title company, an examination fee, and a lender's title insurance. That all added up. That's just the end of page 1. Okay. You see all the borrower's fees that were in there.
Okay.
Page 2. What was that, Sean?
That's a lot of fees.
It is a lot of fees. And you'll see, we didn't talk much about the seller. Okay, the seller does have a few fees in here. Okay, they had to pay $75 for a post-closing fee. That's to send them all their documents. They had to pay off their mortgage. That's not really a closing cost, right? That's a loan payoff, but that's how you would read it on the settlement statement. They had to pay the balance that was owed, the past due balance, to the HOA. They had to get an HOA closing letter. Okay, O'Kelly and Sorahan paid for it previously, and they were just reimbursing it for it. And then we add up both sides, and we see what they walked away with. Okay, on the borrower side, they paid a settlement fee to O'Kelly and Sorahan. They paid title insurance. They had a recording fee, an e-recording fee, an intangible tax, a transfer tax, an HOA. Pay attention to this now. HOA initiation fee, an HOA key transfer fee, an HOA settlement bundle, all paid.
What's the settlement bundle?
I don't know.
That's
That's
weird.
something that their association charges to new members.
Okay.
Okay. So then they had to pay 12 months of homeowners insurance. So they paid 1 year upfront for it. This credit here was somebody else not in the transaction gave them funds, okay, to buy the house. They were gifted their down payment. Okay. So that's how the fees look on here. So here's one that's slightly different. Okay. But you'll see it follows along exactly the same. You know, here's the sales price of the property. The seller is paying $5,000 in contributions to the buyer. Okay. They're paying their portion of their taxes, and they're paying off their mortgage. That was really it for the buyer on this, or seller on this one. The buyer, on the other hand, they owe the price of the home. They got a credit for the sellers paying them. They put $5,000 of earnest money down. They got a loan for $315,000. Okay. They got a credit for the taxes that the seller is paid them for the proration. Okay. So that was a plus, not a minus for them. Then they paid points, bought their rate down. They paid an administration fee, a processing fee, an underwriting fee, a credit report fee, a flood certification fee, and their prepaid interest. Okay. They escrowed 3 months of home insurance. They escrowed 10 months of taxes. Then they had their recording fees, their intangible tax, their transfer tax. Then they had their courier fee, lender fee, lender's title policy, settlement fee, title binder fee, title examination fee, and owner's title policy. Do you see how some attorneys group things together and some of them price them out all separate?
I can't remember what an intangible tax is.
It's something the county charges. Okay. So it's think of it like
I knew it, but I can't remember it. It's like slipped my mind.
And then they had their homeowners insurance premium. They had to prepay for a year of their homeowners insurance. Okay, and that brings us down to the totals. So what was the cash, you know, on this particular purchase? You know, the buyer had to bring $40,000 cash to the table.
Mhm.
Even when the seller gave them $5,000 and they put $5,000 down as earnest money, they still had $40,000 that had to come. Okay. Now some of that's their down payment, but some of it's not. On the seller side, the only other debits
Mhm.
were the commissions and a disbursement fee for doing the wiring fee.
Have you ever got to this point and like the buyer didn't have enough money? Like they were short Like they come
Yeah.
to closing and they're like, oh, we only have 25,000 instead of the 39. What happens when that happens?
Well, you either find the money or you don't close. Those are the only two options. Okay. I've also gotten to that point, Jamie, and the seller didn't have enough money because they owed more on their mortgage and they
Oh.
weren't walking away from the closing table with a check. They were having to bring a check to the closing table. Okay. So, some pro tips for you.
Yeah.
Okay. First one, always ask the lender. Don't try and estimate closing costs. Okay. All you're doing is setting yourself up to potentially be the bad guy. Okay. Number one, you give them too high of a price.
Right.
They don't like you right now. Okay. If you give them too low of a number, then they're not going to like you when they get to the closing table and they find out it's the real number.
Don't they get an estimate when they find the house and like submit the
If we
paper?
ask for it,
I thought they had to do that. I thought there was like an estimate thing.
well, they get a closing disclosure
Okay.
that has to be signed 3 days before closing.
Okay.
Is that when you want to figure out how much you have to bring to the table?
No.
No. We want to find it out way early in the transaction. Okay.
Like right when they fill out the contract, like when the buyer fills out the offer, do they start that same week? Like, hey,
No.
let's start
Perfect. I tell you what, I want to figure it out when they sign their buyer's brokerage agreement. I want to talk to the lender and find out.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're pre-approved for 320.
Okay.
At 320, what would you estimate their closing costs are going to be? Okay.
I had a lender.
Now I can prepare them. And
Okay.
then I'm going to call the lender back again. Okay. So I know now, so that in our conversations on what you can expect and what to be prepared for, I've talked with the lender and he's estimating, you've got your 10% you have to put down, and he's estimating your closing costs are going to be $11,000. Okay. So at 320, we're looking at, it's going to cost us $43,000 at the closing table if we don't have any help from the seller. Okay. That's how we're going to have that conversation before we go look at properties, or when we're looking at the first property. When you find a property, I've got new information now.
Okay.
I can get better numbers now, right?
Right.
Now I can call the lender back and said, hey, we're getting ready to put an offer in on 123 Main Street. Can you run the numbers on that property and let me know what their closing costs are going to be?
Okay.
And,
So
and the first question they're going to ask you is, do you know if there's an HOA or not? So hopefully you've gotten an answer. Yes, there is, or no, there isn't. And if there is, it's $600 a year, $1,200 a year, whatever that number happens to be. Then they'll go pull up the tax records. They'll look at the county location. They'll adjust their estimate for insurance. They'll adjust their tax numbers. They'll adjust their HOA numbers. They'll know that we're closing in about 30 days. So they'll be able to get the right proration on how much taxes and how much HOA is going to be due at the closing table. And they're going to be able to give you a better number. Okay. Now I can have a conversation with my buyer. Okay. Because if I don't know what your closing costs are going to be, how can we have a good conversation about what do we want to ask the seller to contribute?
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I want.
And I don't want to, and I never want to ask too high. And that's actually one of the other ones that are in here. But that's when we have a good conversation with them, is at that point. Now, one of the things I encourage you guys to do, take closing costs and sellers' contributions out of your vernacular. Okay. That's inside language. That's how agents talk to each other.
Okay.
Replace it with sellers help with buyers closing costs.
Okay.
Okay, that's what's on the contract. Even though it says seller, it says closing cost, and then it says seller's contributions to closing cost. I hate that it doesn't put a word in there, buyers. You know, it should be seller's contribution to buyer's closing cost. The seller has to pay their closing cost. The buyer has to pay their closing cost. The buyer, when they make an offer, is potentially asking the seller to help. So why do buyers ask sellers to help with their closing costs?
Well, I thought it was because, and I might be completely wrong, but I thought it was because the seller wants to sell their house. And so,
And that's part of the motivation behind it. Okay.
uh,
And same thing with commissions.
mhm.
Why is the structure come to be that the sellers pay commissions on both sides? Well, I want you to think about it from a really practical standpoint. What is the seller usually leaving the closing table with?
A big chunk of cash,
Yeah. What is the buyer having to bring to the closing table?
a big chunk of cash.
Yeah. So the buyer's out this much money, the seller's in this much money. All the buyer is asking is, hey, I've got to bring all of this. Can you help me a little bit? Okay. And so they're paying moving costs, they've got their down payment, they've got their closing costs, their lender fee. I mean, that number's up here. And that's difficult for a lot of buyers. And so asking the seller to pay some of it has been a way to, sellers offering to pay some of it has been a way to incent buyers. Okay. But the same thing's true for commissions, to take it back to that conversation before. You know, imagine a buyer now has to pay their down payment, and they have to pay their closing cost, and they have to pay commissions on it.
Mhm.
Does it become easier or harder to buy a home?
A lot harder.
A lot harder. Okay. So until they find a way that the buyer can finance their commissions, it's going to be really tough to move it to the other side of the equation.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's why it's like set up that way.
Yeah.
But with how the market is right now, how do you negotiate like it to be like
That's a really good question. So it's the last one on my list here.
okay.
So let me get to that. So as I said, have the lender run new numbers before submitting an offer. So once we know a property, have them submit it. Keep in mind, each loan type has limits as to how much the seller can contribute.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yeah. So with most conventional loans, the most the seller can contribute is 3%. With an FHA, it's 6%. Always check with your lender and know what's the most the seller can contribute. Okay. Because understand, there may be another time when we're negotiating to get the property under contract, we're going to be talking about closing costs then. But after we do our inspection, we may be talking about it again. Okay. So, and where this has been a problem, Jamie, is let's say that we negotiated, I'm buying a $200,000 house and I've got a conventional loan, and I asked for $5,000 in help with seller's contributions to closing and got that offer accepted. Well, now we found out there's some repairs that need to take place at the property. Okay. And we've asked that instead of doing the repairs, we want to increase the seller's contributions to closing by $3,000. So now we've got $8,000 in seller's contributions to closing. Well, it's a conventional loan. They'll only allow $6,000 in seller's contributions to closing. Does that make sense?
It does. So how do you come up with the other 2,000? You don't?
You don't. You either have to reduce the price or find another creative solution for it. Okay. But it can't go in that seller's contributions to closing column.
So
Okay.
who finds the creative solutions?
You as an agent.
Their
Maybe we
class.
find somebody that'll do the repairs and get paid at the closing table. Maybe we work out something with the lender to where we identify the contractor that's going to do it, and have a check cut at the closing table to the contractor.
So cut from the seller's portion at the end, like you bring a receipt or something, or?
Well, it all comes out of a pot, right? It's not coming from the seller, okay? Some of that money came from your lender. Some of it was your earnest money. Some of it was credits from the seller for the prorations of the HOA. When you look at that settlement statement, understand it's one big pot. And all that settlement statement says is here's what's being put in the pot and here's what's being taken out. And here's who's doing each of those things. Okay.
Oh,
Seller
is
put
that what-
this in for this, they took money out for this. This person's in, and at the end of the day, the pot's empty, right? The same amount they got put in got pulled out. So it doesn't matter where the money came from, just that we got a check to a contractor for X number of dollars to do the work that we all agreed to. Sean, you had a question, bud?
Yes, is that where the term creative financing come from?
No, creative financing is a little bit different. That would be just a creative solution to a problem in the transaction. Where creative financing comes in, a good example would be that instead of doing a 10%, a 90% loan, okay, that we're going to actually do an 80% loan and a 10% second mortgage at the same time. So I'm still borrowing 90% of the money, but my first mortgage isn't requiring me to have PMI because I'm 80% equity, or only have an 80% loan, and I've got enough of an equity stake. They're not going to require me to have PMI.
Okay,
Does that make sense? So when we talk
Okay.
about creative financing, that's where we're finding other solutions. And even beyond that, Sean, there are solutions where you take out an 80% loan and the owner of the property does an owner's financing, and they give you a 10% mortgage. So those are what we're talking about when we talk about creative financing. It's not your just normal run-of-the-mill one loan simple solution. Okay. It can even be as much as I need I'm going to go take out a HELOC on my other property to get me enough money to make my down payment on this property over here. So lots of ways that we can get creative with the financing.
okay, I got it.
Okay. So, so the very last one, and this is what you were asking about, Jamie.
Mhm.
Pay attention to sellers' contributions to closing on your comps. Okay. So when you
Okay.
go look at your sales, okay, and this is true both on the listing side and on the buying side. Okay. So imagine you're a seller and I sit down with you and we're doing our listing presentation. I'm preparing you now on what to expect from buyers on their offers. So I don't just tell you this house sold for $250,000. I tell you this house sold for $250,000 and it had $5,000 of help from the seller to the buyer.
So then it really was 245.
Was not that it was 245. It sold for 250, but the
Plus-
seller gave $5,000 in help. So the net to the seller was 5,000, but the sales price was 250. Okay. The seller walked away with 245, but our sales price was 250. And I will show them on all of the comps, you know, this one, the seller didn't give any help to the buyer. On this one, the seller gave $3,000 in help to the buyer. On this one, the seller gave $8,000 in help to the buyer. So when we look at all of these right now, we can see at this price point and in this market, it's
So-
normal for the seller to offer $3,000 or $4,000 in help. Okay,
So
anything
then-
less than that's a better offer. Anything more than that's not as strong.
So when you look at the comps and you see that they gave 5,000, you know, for the 250, does that mean the home maybe only got appraised for 245?
No, they couldn't have written a loan for 250.
Okay.
if it didn't. Okay, it had to appraise at that sales price. Okay, and so conversely, when I go to make an offer, what's one of the first things I do? I go pull comps to make sure that we're making a good offer on the property. And I have that same conversation with my client, looking at the comps. Okay, I see this one in the same neighborhood sold last month for this, and the seller gave this much help. And this one sold 4 months ago for this, and the seller gave this much help. Okay, and so, and it was a great example. Somebody brought me one yesterday, and they were asking the same question, how do I get my seller or my buyer to understand that the market's not like it was 6, 7, 8 years ago? Because their mother had bought a house about 7 years ago, and the seller had paid all her closing costs. And so she's trying to protect her daughter, and she's telling her daughter, no, you need to be getting $7,000 or $8,000 in help from the seller in closing costs. And I was explaining to her that the easiest way to combat that is go back to the comps. And we went and pulled in a half a mile area everything that had sold in the last year. Didn't look at price, didn't look at anything else. But 6 of the 7 properties that 6 of the first 7 properties we looked at had 0 seller's contributions to closing. So it's no longer Trey telling you that the market has changed and you don't need to be asking for seller's contributions to closing. The market is telling you the market has changed.
Where do you see that at?
Where do what?
Where do you find that out at? Like when you look at the seller's contributions?
Yeah, it's on your it's on all your comps. So I'll show you real quick. The last slide's the Q&A slide, so we'll just come back to that one. Let me pull this over, and let's go look at Paragon, and I'll show you exactly where. So I'm just going to pull up real quick off the hot list the 7 closings from today or in the last 24 hours. All right, so when you go in and you look at your closing, so this one was listed for $299.9, but I go down here to my sales data and I see that the sales price was $205 with 0 seller's contributions to close.
I didn't even notice that.
Okay, go to my next one. This one sold for $369, and this one had $8,100 in seller's contributions to closing. So you asked, do people still pay? Do sellers still help buyers? Yes, they do. Okay.
I never even noticed that at the bottom of that paper.
Oh, so look at that. This was listed for $369. They accepted $360 and gave $8,000 in help. Okay. So now with this particular property, it was 45 days on the market. Do you think that they might have been a little overpriced to begin with?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But down here, Jamie, for you to understand, the property had to appraise for the 360.
Right.
Because the loan they're getting, their 90% loan they got, is based off of that 360. So they had to give 10% because it's a 90% conventional loan. Okay. So they put 10% down. Okay. So which would be 36,000, which means that they had a lot of cost,
Yeah.
So they needed help or wanted help from the seller with their closing cost. Okay. Does that help?
It does. So how does that work for sell by owners when they go to the table like this?
It's no different.
Okay.
It's no different. Let me show you. I want you to clarify your question here in just a second, but I want to show you the same things here in FMLS. So let's just look at a closed listing here in FMLS. It's in a little different place. Okay, the list price was $215. The sales price was $215.
Nothing.
And 0 in closing cost. Yeah.
And how many days was that on the market? Where is it listed on?
This one, and again, it's not as user friendly. You actually have to go look at the list date and figure it out.
Okay.
It doesn't show you your days on market. So I'd have to go back to the list date, but go to the very next one, 219,000 with $7,000 in help. So look at what's normal, look at what's going on in your neighborhood and use that as a starting point. You know, if 5,000 is what most sellers are giving to buyers,
Let the seller know that you might need to, oh, my computer turned off.
well, you talk to your buyer and you ask them, you know, how strong do you want your offer to be? That if you want your offer to be stronger, we need to ask for less help. But if you need more help, then we may want to be more aggressive on our price.
Okay. I mean, I think that'll all come with time. Like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't quite make sense a little bit. Like it
Mhm.
does and it doesn't make sense.
So now we'll go back to your question about the for sale by owner. The for sale by owner is a seller.
Right.
Okay. Are they going to have prorated taxes?
Yeah, I mean, they have to
They're gonna
follow.
have all those closing costs are going to be the same for them.
Mhm.
Okay. And even with sellers' contributions to closing, Jamie, I'll buy your house for this price if you'll do this. That's my offer. You either agree or you don't agree.
Okay.
Okay. It's no different than any other person. I'm just giving the offer directly to the owner and not to their agent. That's really the only difference.
Okay. I did
Okay.
call on one for sale by owner yesterday.
Good. Congratulations. So getting brave.
Yes, I guess. But his home was almost $100,000 more than all the other homes
Oh.
in the neighborhood. So I really only called because I was curious, but I used the approach that you said, like taught us in class to
Mhm.
kind of be like, oh, how did you come up with that number? And he talked my ear off for 45 minutes and told me exactly everything he did in the house.
Yeah. Does
And why?
that change the price of the home?
No,
No.
it doesn't. But I wasn't going to tell him that.
No, and I get that. You did the right thing.
I just listened and was like, okay, I see where you're coming from.
So was this helpful? Does this help you understand closing costs a little better?
It does that because I've been a little bit, I don't know. I just have not, I've been to a closing, but I didn't see like how it was all broken down and I just needed some,
Good.
no, it definitely helps. Is there a way we can have those slides like emailed to us?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that would be
I'll
helpful.
print them and email them to you.
Okay. I just
All
want
right.
to be able to explain it to a client when they ask in like layman terms, like
No.
this.
We don't want to talk over their head.
No, not at all. I don't like it when people.
Awesome. Well, guys, any last minute questions I can answer for you?
No.
Yeah, the class definitely helped out. And I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah. As far as the escrow, just curious, is there any way that you could pay that yearly upfront?
That's completely up to your lender.
Okay.
So I don't think that they're ever going to tell you, no, you can't give us more money. So if you wanted to handle it that way, but their process, their system is set up so that it's billed to you monthly.
Yeah.
Okay. And trying to create a different system just for Sean is probably not within their ability. So, but always ask whoever's handling your servicing the mortgage. So,
And the next question pretty much doesn't have anything to do with the class, but as far as the super key, I think you said go to Tucker. Do I go to Namor or Georgia MLS?
Georgia MLS. It's in the same building as the DeKalb Board of Realtors, but go to the Georgia MLS store that's there. It's 1414 Montreal Avenue in Tucker. They close at 4 o'clock. So we missed it today. but they will set it up for you right there on the spot. They will demo it for you. It's the fastest way to get it done.
Okay, great. And that's right off of La Vista, right?
I don't think so. It may be. I'm thinking it's off of Lawrenceville Highway. So I go how Google tells me to go. I'm geographically challenged. So I'm one of those people that can walk into a closet, turn around and not remember how to get back out. So Google is my friend.
Where do you get your
Okay.
lock boxes at?
Same, either the Georgia MLS store or the FMLS store, but whichever one you're going to get it from, always get it from them.
Okay.
Don't back and forth, or they won't show up in the same Supra system. You'll have two different places where your lock boxes live.
Oh, I see what you mean. And Sean, I just did mine online, like set up my super key and I called them.
Yep, and you can do that, but faster, easier in person if it fits with your schedule. So at least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I'll probably go there, but definitely appreciate that then.
You are very welcome. All right, guys, have an awesome day.
Hi, thanks.
Y'all too.